Okay, we're now joined by Riverside City Hall reporter Alicia Robinson. Thanks for being here. We're going to talk about two things to start off with: the Ward 7 runoff race between incumbent Councilman Steve Adams and challenger John Brandreth, and then we're going to talk about the library parcel tax that won pretty easily, it looked like, last night.
Yes.
But let's start with the runoff. How did we get into this position in the first place? How did they finish in the June election to start off with?
Well, back in June, there were actually three candidates for the Ward 7 seat. It was Adams, who is in he's finishing up a second term now, and then John Brandreth, who's sort of a political newcomer. He hasn't run for office before. He's a member of the city's Community Police Review Commission. And then Terry Frizzell, who's a former mayor and councilwoman. And in that three-way race, somebody had to take 50% plus one vote to win outright. Nobody did that. So the top two, which were Adams and Brandreth, went to the runoff that we had yesterday.
Right, and Adams was the top vote getter in the June primary
right.
as well. Right. What were some of the key issues that kind of dominated the race from June through yesterday? I know there was some issues with where each of the candidates stood on the state's realignment plan, where each of the candidates stood on a separate issue with some school district possible merger. I mean, what were the key issues between those two candidates in the election?
Well, I think actually things seemed pretty tame throughout most of the campaign up until the very end. Brandreth sort of billed himself as kind of the outsider. He was going to return transparency to City Hall that he said was lacking. And Adams was more sort of running on his record saying, well, look at all the great things we've done in the city. We've built all these new public facilities and made all these improvements. Towards the end of the election, though, they kind of got into some skirmishes about one of the issues was there has been a proposal floated to merge the Riverside Unified and Alvord school districts, and it seems like some of the Alvord supporters are very opposed to that. They want to stay independent, and Adams picked up on the fact that Brandreth at one point had expressed a sort of, I don't know if I'd call it ambivalence, but he said, well, if that's what they think is best for them, it's fine with me. And so Adams kind of ran with that as saying, well, he wants to take your local control away from you and your school district.
Right.
So I think some of the people with the school district were a little concerned over what the different stances were on that issue.
Well, what were the reactions last night from the candidates themselves? And what was the reaction to from Councilman Adams on his reelection?
Well, when I talked to him, it was still early. We were still waiting for more results, but he seemed pretty optimistic, and he basically said, if the results hold, which they did, I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing, the whole time that I've been in office, which is, working on quality of life issues, making sure we have good schools and that the community's safe. And I unfortunately wasn't able to reach Brandreth last night, so I don't know what his reaction was.
We'll see what he has to say today. Ward 7, what communities are part of Ward 7? What part of the city is Ward 7?
It's basically the westernmost portion of the city. It's sort of the La Sierra area.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, let's move on to the library tax issue. This was a $19 per parcel library fee. How did we get into this situation where the city wanted to go ahead and put this to a vote of the people?
Well, this was actually a renewal of a tax that was originally, it's been in place since 2002, and if it had not been passed last night, it would have expired next year. And I believe back when it was originally passed, it was a way to sort of supplement some of the library's programs and services. But over time, with all the budget cuts that the city has had, the library has suffered a lot from those in terms of its operating budget. And so this tax, it raises about $1.3 million a year for library program services. It even pays for some staffing. And it's become a somewhat larger portion of the library's operating budget. So this time around, I think the supporters wanted to make sure people were aware that if this tax was not renewed, there probably were going to have to be cuts.
Mm-hmm. What were some of there was a lot of civic backers and community leaders who supported the measure. Was there What was the campaign like? Was there any kind of real organized opposition to the tax?
No, there really wasn't. I think that there were some people out in the community who were critical of it, and I think that some of them felt that to continue the tax was sort of a tacit approval of the way that the city has treated the library's budget. And so, they felt like why should they have to keep paying out of their pocket for something that in the past had always been a part of the general fund, which is also their tax dollars.
Right.
But there was not an organized campaign against it.
Right. And just to remind people, that tax required a 2/3 supermajority, basically a 2/3 majority to get approval. And let's see, that's just as a reminder, we're going to put the results back up here. The yes, and these are according to the final, but still unofficial results. There's still some ballots that will have to be counted, anything that was dropped off at polls yesterday or any provisional ballots cast. But as you can see, the Measure I campaign, 16,092 votes in favor, yes, to just 2,787 votes no. So that's 85%. So they easily got that 2/3 majority for that to gain approval. Remind us how much this is planned to generate, and does the city, does libraries, do they know what it's going to go for? Is it going to go for just plain operations, or could they fund some capital improvements and other things like that with the money?
It is actually, I believe it's actually spelled out in the language of the tax that it is specifically, it's for programs and operations. It's not really for capital projects. And again, it's about $1.3 million a year, and it's the things that they have said that it's funded so far, which is probably what's going to continue, is I think it's about 15 staff positions, as well as programs like children's story time, tutoring, and a program where they deliver books to homebound seniors, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Alicia, we appreciate you joining us. Now, there was just two things on for the Riverside ballot this November. That was the Ward 7 runoff, as well as the library tax. But next year could be an interesting one to follow. We have the mayor's race is up in the city of Riverside. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And longtime mayor Ron Loveridge is not seeking another term, so we're going to have an open seat. Do you expect that now that this kind of November is away? Do you expect the campaign to start really heating up first part of the year for the mayoral race in Riverside?
Well, this election has already been going on for many months now. We've got currently 3 sitting council members, Mike Gardner in Ward 1, Andy Melendrez in Ward 2, and Rusty Bailey in Ward 3 have all thrown their hats in. We've also got a former councilman, Ed Adkisson, is also running. And the people that I've been talking to have basically said, you know what, people don't like to campaign, let alone start a campaign over the holidays.
Right,
but
sure.
Come January, things are probably going to pick up. It wouldn't surprise me to see a few more people jump into that race.
Right. Well, that will be an interesting one to watch, and we'll, of course, have to have you back on as the campaign unfolds to get the latest on that, of course. But that is for the 2012 elections in the city of Riverside. So, again, Alicia Robinson, City Hall reporter for the Press Enterprise here in Riverside. Appreciate you joining us to chat a little bit about the library tax in the measure in the Ward 7 runoff race. Again, in those races, the library tax passed, and incumbent Steve Adams won re-election to another term on the city council against challenger John Brandreth. We're going to take a break, and then we'll be back and we'll discuss some school board elections in Southwest Riverside County with school reporter and education reporter Michelle Clampy. So stay tuned. We'll be back shortly. Appreciate it.